7 a.m. here on WLAE-TV.
Hey, I'm Keith Spiro from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. My guest this week on Let's Talk is my colleague, sports columnist Jeff Duncan. Jeff, are the Saints going to the Super Bowl this year?
Well, they haven't been eliminated from the playoffs, so I'm saying there's a chance.
All right, the eternal optimist, Jeff Duncan. Tune in this week on Let's Talk for more Saints talk.
You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams as we always do. Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, all on the docket, and two of the best sports journalists we have in the state or with us today, Ricardo Lecompte of Channel 4 Sports and Rod Walker of the Times-Picayune, NOLA.com, and The Advocate. Guys, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming down. Rod, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about what's happening at the Picayune, the podcast. Tell us all about it.
Busy time of the year, you know, when you got the college football, NFL, and NBA all overlapping. So covering all of that, we do our Saints Insiders podcast every Wednesday and Friday. You can catch it on the YouTube channel, the Saints Insiders YouTube channel.
Beautiful. Rod, and of course, Rod, welcome back to the show. And good to have you back as well, Ricardo. Of course, you guys are busy over at Channel 4. What, high school football rolling? Right. Again, and everything else that's going on. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, Rod was talking about that crossover. Yeah, literally, this is the busy time of year where we have everything kind of going on. And you were talking about the high school football. We're in the playoffs right now. 4th Down Friday, 10:15 on Channel 4. It's the fastest 20 minutes in New Orleans sports. We do all the highlights and scores. It is a fast-paced show, but we've got everything covered for week 2 of the high school football playoffs. Our game of the week is Chalmette and Hahnville. So it's a kind of an interesting matchup in the Division I non-select side of the bracket. You've got Hahnville, which has had a great season. They missed the playoffs last year. First-year head coach Greg Boynes, leading them to, hopefully go deep into the playoffs here. Chalmette, big win last week against Terrebonne. I think, according to the school, it was their first playoff road win in 3 decades. So very impressive outing by the Owls. So it'll be a very interesting second-round matchup between those two. So exciting game of the week. Seth Lewis covers our game of the week. He does a great job. So he'll be reporting on that. And then we've got 4th Down on 4 Sunday nights at 10:35. Doug is taking a little vacation on the Saints bye week, so I'll be hosting on Sunday night. We've got John Summerall, the head coach for Tulane. He'll be our guest there. He caught up with Doug. We also got Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, break down the kind of the bye week as they look ahead to these final 6 games for the Saints. we all thought they were dead.
Yeah.
But now a little bit of life with Darren Rizzi in there. So we'll see what the Saints are able to do these final 6 games.
Let's jump into it. Again, we'll start with the Saints, 35-14 winners over the Browns, 4-7. They're in their bye week. They got the Rams the next week. But again, now 2 in a row for Rizzi, and the Rizzi effect seems real. You and I were talking about before the show. The difference in the locker room, the difference in just the vibe out at Saints camp with Rizzi now in charge as the interim head coach. If you would, for the audience, kind of maybe paint a picture for them.
Yeah, I mean, those weeks leading up to Dennis Allen's firing, I mean, the locker room, and Ricardo can attest to this, it was getting kind of dead. I mean, just not a lot of guys in there sometimes, and just wasn't really lively. And then all of a sudden when Rizzi took over, you know, he implemented a lot of changes. He moved the seating around for where players were sitting. Because after COVID, they kind of split the positions up just so the whole position group wouldn't get COVID or whatever. So anyway, so he brought the positions back together. All the running backs sit together now, the D linemen, everybody's sitting together, and the music's blaring now. And this is even before they won that, the first game under Rizzi. So you can just tell that everything just sort of changed, and it's carried over into the second week, and here they are 2-0.
Right. Using a lot of props like Peyton did, right? I mean, again, I was asking Rod before we came on, I wonder if that's sustainable, but again, he seems to have at least caught the attention of the team, again, at least on an interim basis.
Yeah, and I still remember after they had lost to the Panthers in Charlotte, I remember talking to some of the players. I remember Alvin Kamara was speaking, Tyrann Mathieu, and there was a lot of questions about, has this locker room been lost? And they were basically saying, no, it hasn't, but we're still playing for each other. And the telling thing was they didn't say they were playing for Dennis Allen.
Right.
They're playing for each other. And I think that is a big difference when you have, I guess, your leader, your players aren't really bought into as much as they want to. Now, granted, they're still playing, they're making sure that the guy next to them, they're going to be there for them. But when you're not saying, hey, I'm trying to save Dennis Allen's job, I'm trying to save my head coach's job, or I'm going to play better for him, that's kind of telling. And I think with these last 2 weeks, you kind of see an energy from this team that Darren Rizzi is bringing. When they're making big plays, let's say on defense, the first thing they're doing when they're coming off the field after a third down, they're high-fiving Darren Rizzi.
Yeah.
They're getting they are actually engaged with their head coach, and I think that's part of where the players are bought into what Darren Rizzi is doing. Now, I know you said, is that sustainable just because of how he is?
Yeah.
That's his personality. So I don't think it's like something over the top or something that's out of character for Darren Rizzi. That is who he's been. I mean, we've had at the beginning of the season before he took over, he is probably the only person who could talk special teams and everybody's engaged in terms of hey, what's the kickoff rule? What's, we're doing with kickers and doing this. And most people would be like, all right, are we talking football here? But Darren Rizzi will grab your attention and do that. And certainly Rod and I have been out to many press conferences where he's talking, and you're like, yeah, Darren Rizzi stands out.
Yeah.
So I'm not concerned about, I think this is a sustainable thing in terms of his message is going to get across because he's not being outside of what he is. Now, can the play continue? That's the big difference. Can they fix some of the things that has gone wrong for this team offensively and defensively as they finish these last 6 games, and can they fix that during the bye week? That's going to be the telling question. But in terms of this team being motivated, this team having that swag, they're going to have this under Darren Rizzi for the rest of the year.
You agree with that?
That was the thing about Rizzi. I mean, even when they brought him in, and that's what the players liked, is that even before they brought him in, I mean, he connected so well with the players. He's a special teams coach, so I mean, he probably didn't have to ever interact with Derek Carr, but he did, because that's just kind of the kind of person he is. So he talked to everybody in that locker room, even if it wasn't someone he directly had to coach. And that's just transferred over to now that he's taken over. And he's a guy that's, he wanted this job when Dennis Allen got it. He's one of the guys they interviewed. He wanted that Dolphins head coach job back in 2019. So he wants to be a head coach. We could always tell that. I mean, you could just, he mentioned the press conferences. I mean, we talk to the coordinators every week. We talk to Joe Woods, we talk to Clint Kubiak, and we talk to Rizzi. And you could just tell that Rizzi was just the way he presented himself. I mean, he just kind of had that it factor that you want to see in a head coach, and it's, again, we're seeing it now. I mean, it's translated over.
Guys, when you look at what has transpired, they're starting to get a little more healthier now. Okay, you got 6 games left. If they split, is Rizzi, in your opinion, maybe the leading candidate to maybe take over to kind of stay with what they're doing? Or do you think they're going to open it up at the end of the season? And obviously they have to do interview because, again, it's the NFL rules, but do you think they'll open it up, or Rizzi would be the odds-on favorite?
if they go, you said to win 3 more games.
If they split. Yeah.
I think he kind of jumps to the top for sure if that happens. And he's a guy. And this is an organization we know how the organization's run. They kept Dennis Allen because they kind of felt comfortable.
Right.
So I could see them not going away from that and going with the guy they're comfortable with, because that's just kind of how this franchise runs. Now, maybe they do decide, okay, let's go in a different direction. But I just know that this franchise is typically they kind of have that little comfort zone, and they like to kind of stick with it. So I wouldn't be shocked if Rizzy rises to the top, especially if he's, if he goes 3-3 the rest of the way.
Split,
Yeah, I think he's making already case with these first 2 games that hey, let me throw my hat into the running and maybe I have a chance of getting this job. I feel like the Saints still need to do a reset, and that means bring in your quarterback, bring in your head coach, and kind of let them bring in a new front office, because let that front office make those picks for this draft. Because outside of this Marshawn Lattimore trade, what you've kind of got in these next 2 drafts, it'll be very important to set the tone for what this franchise is going to have in the next 5-10 years. So there's still some candidates if you're talking about comfort with this organization, guys that they know.
Right.
That's why Aaron Glenn's name is comfortable. I still think the hot name is Ben Johnson. Like that is the guy that if you want to, now that you kind of reset and have this salary cap, if you can get it manageable enough, can this job be attractive for somebody like that where, I know we always say that the 32 jobs in the NFL are very rare, but sometimes there are bad situations that you can go into, and if you're not producing, you're not winning in a results-oriented business, you're going to lose your job quickly. So you got to also find those guys who are looking for jobs. You got to find jobs that are sustainable enough where you go, hey, there's things I can work with here, where at least if I'm showing I'm making progress, at least I can hold my job, and then we can see if we can do that. But I still think that Darren Rizzi is making a case for him to get this job, but I think ultimately this franchise has to do a reset with a new head coach and a new front office, and pick for basically restructure this roster.
I agree 100%. Rod, where do you stand on that? Do you really think that, again, Mrs. Benson will go in and maybe Mickey Loomis moves to another position, make changes in the front office to go in a whole new direction?
I don't think she will. I just think, I don't know, when it comes to those decisions, I just think I think she trusts Mickey. She's been, he's been here for over 20 years. So I don't know if she'll make those kind of changes. But just going back to that job, I think a lot of it's going to depend on what else is open out there too. You assume the Jacksonville job may come open.
Right.
I guess the Jets may. There's some jobs that are probably, they may be more attractive than this one. So that's something that's going to have to factor in. And so I don't know if, like right now, I don't know if the Saints job is one that you say, oh, I want that job. That's like, I don't know if it's that kind of job right now.
I agree with you, and I agree with Ricardo as well. I think the top candidates will obviously again will go toward more of the better jobs. But I think one of the reasons why the Saints job is not one that it would be a go-to job is because of the cap situation. And I think again, coaches are going to look at this and go, okay, what can I bring in over the next few years to build this program up if I don't have the cap space available?
Right, and that's where it comes to the front office and who makes these decisions. And again, it depends on what this offseason. I'm always like, what's going to be Mickey Loomis' status when we move forward? Is it one of those things where he's not obviously the Gale and the Saints brass aren't going to fire Mickey Loomis as much as fans would want that. Right. But does he take a step back and go, look, maybe I shouldn't be the one that I still want to be with this organization. Maybe he takes another role in the front office, but maybe I get to have a hand in who I bring in to make these decisions as a general manager. Because that's going to be key. If you're going to make these picks for the future and be sustainable over these years, this next group of whoever you get and hire in this front office has to make the right decision, especially with these draft picks coming up. So it'll be interesting to see what he decides to do. And remember, when he had that press conference last offseason, and there were rumblings about him possibly retiring. And he's like, hey, I want another year, I want another crack at this. I think if we change X, Y, and Z culturally, we can get this thing going. If those changes hasn't happened, and maybe he has a self-assessment and goes, you know what, maybe I need to just kind of step aside and let me handpick the next GM, or let me handpick the guys that make these decisions in the draft, and let me kind of take a different role. I think personally that would benefit the Saints moving forward. It just depends on if he decides to do that or not. But you're going to have to make a move in terms of that front office. So those decisions of who you bring in on this roster, because again, that cap space, you're going to need those draft picks to build this roster, talent-wise, depth-wise, everything else. And you can't miss on this, because we've seen in the past few drafts, the Saints have not been too good. There's been more misses than hits. You've got to have that structure in there where you can go new head coach, new GM, new, whatever you have on the new roster, and then that's what you're going to do to carry forward. But again, be very interested to see what Mickey decides to do this offseason.
And I do agree that it would be Mickey's ultimate decision. Like I don't think Ms. Benson will make that decision. Say, Mickey, it's time for you to. I think he would have to do it, and I think them getting rid of Dennis Allen might be the move, because to me it was pretty clear that Mickey did not want to make that move, and Ms. Benson and Dennis Lauscher, whoever, they did want to. So that may be the thing that makes Dennis say, okay, you know what, maybe it's time for me to step back a little bit. So.
But I want to bring something up, because you've talked about it on social media, and that's the soft tissue injuries, okay? And it's both organizations, both the Saints and the Pelicans. You guys, again, have a unique perspective. Both you guys were at camp up in Los Angeles. You guys saw what was going on up in California. Talk a little about this avalanche of injuries that they're dealing with. And look, I know there's injuries around the league, but again, it just seems to be epidemic on Airline Drive with both of those organizations.
Yes. It's really mind-boggling.
It is.
I mean, it just really is.
The Pelicans last night, I mean, what they went through with...
They had a G League, they had the squadron out there.
Yeah, they
Literally,
did.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that team could have won the Summer League championship. I mean, those are the kind of guys they had out there. But I mean, some of the injuries are, I mean, like Herb Jones got hurt diving for a loose ball. I mean, that happens. But I mean, the hamstring injuries, especially on both sides, are concerning. It's something that Rizzy kind of talked about when he first took over. He changed some of the
activation period,
like
right?
Like an activation period to kind of ramp these players up, going to practice, and you hope that helps. But I don't know. Like I can't explain it. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know what's going on. But
they are snake bitten, and I've made this constant joke. Maybe they need to change the lead pipes in New Orleans and get those things out of here, because maybe something's in the water or something's just not working. But yeah, it's unbelievable how many injuries you've just seen that. And part of it in California, because some of these injuries were popping up in California. And from just kind of like, I remember I was talking to Jermont Bushrod, and he was out there, and he's like, I bet these guys are underestimating the weather out here, not kind of hydrating like you would do if you were in Metairie, when you know it's going to be humid, it's going to be hot, like I need to get my fluids in. You're in California, it's like, man, it's pretty nice here in July. Like, like maybe that was part of the reason why those injuries happened in camp. But for it to carry over into the season, and it's significant guys, soft tissue injuries, I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I've seen changes in the training staff, trying different things. You mentioned the activation period that Darren Rizzi is now, used in the beginning. It's basically like they're trying to throw things at the wall, and hopefully something sticks for these injuries. But man, like for both organizations, it is rough going.
Yeah. Against the Browns on Sunday, Kubiak seemed to again be more. When you look at the offense, having Taysom back, I was having McCoy back. He seemed to be able to go a little bit deeper in the playbook. Talk about what you saw. Yeah,
I just think this team, I mean, we saw it in the first 2 weeks of the season. If the Saints can run the ball, they're going to be really good. It's those games when they couldn't run the ball, and they had that period when they went without McCoy and Ruiz, so they were like really struggling in the interior part of the line, and that meant they couldn't run the ball, which means they were getting into a bunch of second and long, third and long, and that just kind of snowballs for this team. They have to run the ball well, and obviously when you got Taysom running the ball, you're going to run the ball well, and with him and Kamara both. And the way they are a receiver right now, I mean, they really have one good receiver and not a whole lot else. They're using the tight ends really well now, but they have to run the ball to be successful. And if they can do that, it's sustainable. And if they can't, it's not going to be sustainable.
Another thing they did was move the pocket a lot with Carr. I felt like Carr stayed and hung in the pocket longer on Sunday than maybe he's done in other games as well.
Yeah, and that's what this team needed to do, was establish that play action. That is what the bread and butter of Clint Kubiak's offensive system is establish the run first, and then it's that play action, bootlegs, rollouts. And you're seeing, I think Derek Carr, and I know Rod wrote up a little article about afterwards when we were in there and talking to DeMario and how great he's been. Yet when Derek Carr is on and he's good, this is a solid offense. It's just when you get the bad of Derek Carr that you go, okay, the Saints can't win like this. And I think it goes back to, again, it sounds simple. It's simple football. If you can run the football, if you can establish the line of scrimmage, if you can do that, it makes Derek Carr's job a whole lot easier to operate and run this offense. And as long as Alvin Kamara is having, a great year, and we all thought he was on the back end decline of, getting close to 30 and doing it. No, he is looking like he's got fresh young legs. Taysom Hill is still a unicorn at his age. If they can still establish and run that way, then it will make Derek Carr's life a lot easier, and they will win a lot more games because of it.
I think something that Carr does that people kind of take for granted is there are a lot of times he's getting pressured and he just throws the ball away, like throwing to the ground, and he's just avoiding these second and longs and third and long. You're not gaining any yards, but you're not pushing it back to 3rd and 15 and 3rd and 17. I think those little plays matter, and they help this offense be able to move the ball.
Yeah, it takes great discipline for someone like that, and that's what happens when you have a 10-year plus veteran at quarterback. They know, all right, this play's dead. Let's move on to the next one.
Pretty amazing to get a guy like MVS at this point in the season, huh?
Yeah, he's had 2 great games. Derek Carr kind of mentioned how he likes to throw to guys who are fast like that, and he's definitely fast, and he's been a welcome addition because without him, I just don't know.
Yeah. No Shaheed. Yeah. Again, no Olave, you have no speed. Right. And all of a sudden now you have a guy that can take the top off the defense.
Yeah, it's a vertical threat and somebody who is a veteran because, again, Derek Carr mentioned it after the game as well. He's like, I want you to run this or do this. And even though he's still new at the system, he's still a veteran in terms of what, how to play this game. So it's like, yeah, I got you, Derek Carr. I know what you're doing. So that is also a big addition as well, adding someone like MVS.
And you mentioned
I was saying on that touchdown pass, it was a play that MVS said that there was a broken coverage and Carr is rolling out, and so MVS just rolled out with Carr, and he threw it to him, and he just ended up scoring on it. So that was just, I don't know if a younger player would have been able to make that read on that play and do that, but he was able to do it. So that was big.
You mentioned the tight ends. It seemed like early in the season the tight ends were glorified blockers trying to be able to, again, help that offensive line. They have been more, again, part of the passing game.
Yeah, I know last year we thought Juwan Johnson was going to have this monster year, and it never really happened. Now he's starting to make a few more plays, but Foster Moreau has been really good, catching passes. So, and that's what they're going to have to do now. They don't have receivers, so they got to use anything they can. Anybody that can catch a pass, they're going to throw it to them.
Right. How about the defense? Well, again, because they seem to be flying around now. There's a new energy on that defense, it seems like.
That's part of the Riz effect. This defense has the Riz, as the kids would say. I know that sounded corny, but yes, no, that's literally. But that they're playing, they still have some issues and problems. The big one thing is explosives. They've given up so many big explosive plays. Jameis Winston had a couple of those that led to all the Browns' touchdowns. But outside of those explosive plays, they did well at stopping Nick Chubb. They were able
66 yards on the ground.
Right, and this guy, and I know Nick Chubb is still ramping up because he's coming back from injury, but still, to stop someone like that and hold him to that, the defense is playing better. And I think it is part of the fact that you have a new voice in there with Joe Woods, who we've talked to the players last couple of weeks where Joe Woods calling plays, and they are saying he knows exactly what he's doing in terms of when to call coverages, when to send blitzes, when to dial up the right play when it is. And sometimes just hearing the new voice does kind of, reinvigorate, a unit like that has been struggling, in that stretch of 7 games when they were on that losing streak. So, yeah, the defense still has a lot of things to clean up in terms of those big plays and trying to limit those, but the effort, the tackling, the things that they weren't doing during the losing streak, they're doing now.
Right.
Well, let me just flip back to one thing on the offense we didn't talk about is the offensive line. Myles Garrett for Cleveland is one of the best defensive players in the league, if not the best. And you really didn't even know if he played Sunday. They kept him. Fuago did a tremendous job, and they did some other things to kind of to limit him. But you go back to the Dallas game with Michael Parsons, the same thing. So this is a unit that the big question mark about this team was the offensive line going into the season. And when they've played these players like this, they've held up on their own. Right. The defense, I think they're, going back to your question. I think they've really just they're starting to find their mojo. I guess that would be the word to use for it. They're starting to get that back finally, but they are still giving up some big plays. And I think this Rams game coming up will tell us a little bit more about it. The Browns' offense is not very good. Right. They were like the lowest scoring team in the league coming to this game. The Atlanta game before that, that was just a lot of adrenaline and energy boost, I guess, for that game. So I think this Rams game will be a much better gauge of really where this Saints team is. Because I'm not, as good as Riz has been these first 2 weeks, I'm not jumping on that yet because, again, it was an energy game, a game against a really bad team. So I need to see what you can do against the
and coming off a bye week, right? Where again, they're gone. You got to get everything ramped back up again, get that energy going again, and be able to sustain that. That's going to be a big tell again coming out to see how they look against the Rams after the bye week.
Yeah, there's certain things with this Rams where we talk about explosives, and Matthew Stafford seems to kind of be getting into his groove. He's got Cooper Kupp, he's got Puka Nacua back. Kyron Williams has been great in the back. Like they've got weapons and they've got chances to really exploit the Saints defense. It will be telling to see coming out of this bye week if Joe Woods and whatever they're able to draw up, if they're able to kind of contain that and play. I think the energy is still going to be there, honestly. When they're talking about this bye week, and you never want to take a break when you're kind of rolling in momentum. But at the same time, you need a rest. You need to get an Eric McCoy healthy back, on the offensive line. You need to just get some pieces back, kind of reset, reassess what you're kind of doing, and then focus your energy on the Rams because they know at this point, you've got some momentum now in terms of we're back in this race. We're not, you're 4-7. Okay, you're not dead yet. You're not looking at Tankathon and seeing where you're picking in terms of this draft, but you've got some life here. So they're going to have that internal motivation to go play the Rams. The question is, did they make those adjustments defensively to stop a very potent Rams offense? And we're going to see that Sunday in the Dome if they've done that or not.
Rod, that's where I want to go. Can this team get back into it? 6 games. There's some winnable games on the schedule.
Some winnable games. The Falcons look like they're sliding a little bit. I mean, they got blown out by Denver Sunday. So I think they can get back in. This Rams game is really. If they beat the Rams, I think we're all going to be like, okay, maybe this is really going to happen. I think there's a shot. I mean, they're 2 games back. Well, technically 3 games because. Falcons had a tiebreaker because of the winning position in the division too. But so it's going to take a lot. I mean, it's just not a lot of games left to play with. I mean, they got to really get on a good roll here. And again, it starts with the Rams game. I mean, if you beat them, I think you start thinking, okay, well, they can beat the Giants. They have to play the Bucs at the end of the season. You got the Commanders in there. Who am I leaving out?
You got the Raiders, got the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders. You got the Raiders.
Right. There's some winnable games.
To me, you got 2 or 3 games. You got 2 games, I think, the Giants and the Raiders. Because the Giants are switching quarterbacks, going to Tommy DeVito. So I think you got 2 games that are. I mean, you better beat the Raiders and the Giants. You can beat the Bucs at the end of the season, maybe, And so to me, I mean, that Rams game is just so pivotal. If you win that one, it kind of determines the outlook of the rest of the season.
Same question.
Yeah, that Rams game is so vital because again, if you kind of look big picture, NFC West. There's probably only one team coming out of it if you're looking at wild cards and everything else. The winner of that division pretty much. That they're going to the playoffs. So there's all the motivation for the Rams coming in this, and the same thing with the Saints. Yeah, the Rams game is going to be very important to really, take this team seriously in terms of, all right, they're back in this race or not. The one thing that also helps is that the NFC South isn't as, they're only two back of Atlanta. The Bucs are trying to get healthy. I know they're getting Mike Evans back this weekend, but, if they're not at full strength, the Bucs can kind of slide there. Atlanta, they're not as consistent or maybe as dominant as we had probably thought. So they're still in the race because they're playing in the NFC South with some of these teams. But yes, the Rams team, if they can beat the Rams, this will be very telling for them making the postseason, making a run or not.
Any final word?
No, I mean, that's it. I do think playing this NFC South for the past few years, the division's been so bad. I think that it's kind of made the Saints feel like they were probably a little better or a little closer to success than they really were.
Yeah.
And so we'll see how it plays out this year. I mean,
it's going to be interesting. Again, like I said, we talked about there's winnable games on the schedule. Can Rizzy keep this team focused? Can they keep that Riz effect going? And then we'll see how the cards fall toward the end of the season. What happens after the season going forward? But the fans want to see wins. And again, obviously, you'd like to get a better draft slot, but the fans want to see wins, especially with that 7-game losing streak.
And you talk about the fans, and I think this is one of the other effects of Darren Rizzi. I mean, it seems like the fans seem to connect more with Darren.
He's like a New Orleans type guy.
He does. I mean, he's from Jersey,
right?
But man, he carries himself like he's from the East or something. His attitude and the way he did, it's infectious for this fan base. And I think that's what's kind of been missing these last 2.5 years. That the fans didn't really have that connection with DA, but they certainly certainly are feeling it with Darren Rizzi. And that is an effect when you go into that dome now, the last 2 games especially. It's been, man, like the energy and everything else that we've known and been accustomed to the Superdome seems to be back just because of Darren Rizzi. That's another, I think, effect of the Rizzi.
I think his style reminds me a lot of Dan Campbell. Maybe not quite as extreme as Dan Campbell, but he's a guy that he just rallies the troops and they believe in him. And going back to like Dan Campbell, when the Lions hired him, I thought it was like the worst hire ever.
I think a lot of people did.
I really thought it was a bad hire. Now he's like one of the best coaches in the league. I mean, guys just rally around him, and he knows how to push all the right buttons, and that's kind of what they're saying about Rizzi. So that's why I think that he has a really good shot of getting his job if he can finish strong here.
I mean, they went from, think about this, before Dennis Allen was fired, again, this franchise, the front office, the ownership was worried about fans coming to the Dome with bags on their heads, right? And now, again, there seems to be a complete, total different situation now with Rizzi in charge, and of course, not just again what he's done with the locker room, but as you mentioned, energizing the fan base as well. It's really been amazing turnaround in just a few weeks.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Dennis, I thought he was a good coach. He didn't connect with the players. Like, I don't know if I ever saw Dennis like getting onto a player, like, or getting fired up with the player. I mean, he was just, he just couldn't connect with the guys like he needed to.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's kind of what ended up being the Dome.
And it goes back to just sometimes maybe hearing a different voice. And I'm not a big fan of firing midseason.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that really fits.
Right.
But I think in this case, in this instance, I'm not saying that was the 100% the right move, but just having a different voice, a different energy.
Yeah.
And I think this is what this team needed, because again, the players still believe in each other, but sometimes you kind of need that extra voice, that authoritative voice that's like, hey man, like, you've got this, like, and it's the same roster. It really is still the same roster. When healthy, we're kind of seeing the production now when you just have that voice and that confidence. I called it a renewed confidence coming back, when you had Rizzi these last 2 games, and certainly that confidence is back in that locker room.
Because to me, if you had kept Dennis Allen after the Panthers lost, because it was obvious the team was gone, the guys were putting stuff on Twitter after the game. I mean, they were done. I mean, this losing streak's probably at 9 now if Dennis Allen they don't beat the Falcons, and they probably don't. I mean, James comes in here and
and then the Dome's full of fans with bags.
There's your paper bags, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. All right, you're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guests tonight are Ricardo Lecompte, Channel 4 Sports, Rod Walker of NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, and the Advocate. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll hear from our underwriters as we come back. Tulane's up first. We'll also talk about the Tigers as well as the Pelicans. All that coming up on Inside New Orleans Sports. Stay tuned.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Rod Walker and Ricardo Lecompte are our guests. All right, let's talk about the Tulane Green Wave, 9-2, 7-0, 17 straight conference games, conference wins, longest streak in the country. Just blanked Navy, just destroyed Navy, 35-0. They're 20th in the college football playoff poll, 20th in the AP, 20th in the coaches poll. They got Memphis on Thanksgiving night, and I've said it on my radio show, I'll say it here. They're the best football team in the state right now. They're playing their best football. Rod, we'll take you first. Your thoughts on the Wave, because again, we thought they'd be a pretty good team, but again, there was such a turnover in this roster. And you're talking about 50-plus players, still adding players in the spring. And what Summerall's been able to do in terms of meshing this team together, and these guys are playing really good football down the stretch here. What are your thoughts?
They've been really impressive. I mean, you said the best team in Louisiana. The rankings say the same thing. So I think it all starts with the quarterback. I mean, in college football, with the transfer portal and just recruiting. I mean, sometimes you can get a good guy, and they were able to. They got a really good quarterback in Mensa. They're playing well. This is a team that they have 2 losses. I think if they play Kansas State again, if they had played them later in the season, I think this team, you're looking at a 1-loss team, and a team that's really threatening to be in the playoffs. I mean, I think they still have an outside shot. They need Boise State to slip up somewhere, and they'd have to go on and win. But this is a team that, I think they're a playoff caliber team. I don't know if they're going to get a chance to show that, but I think they are on that level. I think they're good on both sides of the ball.
I agree with Rod. I'm telling you, if they don't play Kansas State and Oklahoma early, and they're playing later in the season, I think they win both games. I mean, Oklahoma's not the team everybody thought they was, and Kansas State's still a really good team, but Tulane is so much better than they were early. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the drastic improvement from this team from the beginning, from that Kansas State and Oklahoma losses. I mean, part of the reason why, this is why we don't go back and change mistakes in the past, because I think that built that team to where they're at today. So sometimes you have to be in those battles to kind of learn what you are, and certainly Darian Mensah needed those types of games because now he's playing better, and that's where it starts. And one thing that they did against Navy that Darian hasn't done a lot this season is get out of the pocket and run. John Summerall has been stressing for him to do that and run. And it was funny after the game, he goes, "Man, he looked like Michael Vick out there scrambling and running and doing what it is." Makai Hughes has been great in the backfield. I mean, the running. I mean, he was great last season. He's, I think, on another level this year, and that's a big difference. Again, we go back to fundamentals of football. You can run the football. Everything else opens up. And this defense has improved. And it's gotten to a point where, John Summerall, he is a defensive kind of guy. But he's at a point now where he's like, I go into the defensive meetings, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to mess up what these guys are doing because I think they're playing at another level. Certainly, Tyler Grubb's up there in that linebacker group. Sam Howard just seems to get every single turnover possible. And I think Patrick Jenkins is still one of the best D linemen, probably in the state that doesn't get talked about enough. And when you're doing that, scoring special teams, you're able to do that. Yeah, this is a team that if Boise State can slip up somehow, and that's the only difference. I mean, I still feel confident Tulane can beat Memphis next Thursday. I think they can beat Army in that AAC championship game, and it's crazy. I mean, Tulane in the playoff, it's still a realistic possibility.
And for me, I think, I know this is going to be probably a little far-fetched, but I think Tulane benefits if somehow, it's not going to happen, I don't think, but if Army could beat Notre Dame this weekend, that pushes Army up higher in the rankings, and then Tulane can go in and just really take care of business. I mean, you do that, that might be enough to, let's say the Big 12 ends up having a 3-loss team as a champion. That kind of helps Tulane's case as well. So there are some scenarios that could get Tulane into that playoff, and they just need to just keep being impressive like they've been.
At Wyoming or Oregon State for Boise, and then Colorado State in the Mountain West Championship. That's their 3 games left. Again, we mentioned Army and Notre Dame this weekend, and of course Tulane and Memphis on Thanksgiving. Again, we don't know where the venue is going to be for the American Athletic Conference Championship. We'll know that again probably by this weekend. You mentioned the defense, and the one thing one thing I've talked about is what Summerall's been able to do in terms of the transfer portal and going after again schools that are not in the Power 4, and so many of those kids that he brought in that now are performing for him on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of his formula. That's, at Tulane, that's what you're gonna have to do. His hard problem. The biggest problem is going to be like holding on to guys sometimes because he's getting guys that are really good. And like, hey, maybe I can go play in the Power 4 school, and then they may want to, move on. But I mean, he's just done a really good job. And I think even at his opening press conference when he got hired, we talked about the Rizzi effect. I mean, we kind of saw it with him too. We're like, okay, this guy, he gets it. Like I knew he came from, where he came from Troy, and we could tell that he just had a really good understanding of what it takes to win at a program like Tulane. And he's hit the ground running here.
Yeah, and when you say taking over a program like Tulane, it's not like he's taken over, let's say, an Ohio State or an Alabama, or where a culture and talent is already still on the roster. Like, you come to Tulane, and granted, they've been good the last couple of years, but you have to transition with not only new players, but also new staff. Who do you want to retain? Who do you have to do that? You've got to basically push all the right buttons, and then you're starting with this whole new group and then trying to mesh everything together. And that isn't a testament to the job that John Summerall has done this season. I mean, this is not as easy as he's making it look to get to this point where they're blowing out Navy. Like, that takes a really good head coach, a good recruiter, a good person, a good lead. Like, all of those things that you're seeing at John Summerall, and Rod's right. Like, when you saw it at the opening press conference, those first couple press conferences, trying to get a feel of this, you just felt like, okay, he knows what he's doing. He's got, you know, there's no accident of why he had a bunch of wins prior at Troy, and he was winning all these conference games and conference championships. Like, he knows what he's doing, and now to mesh what he's been able to do and get this team playing the way they are. I mean, he's making it look as easier than it should.
Right. No, I agree with that. I definitely do.
He'll be a hot commodity. I mean, I'm talking about him holding on to players. Tulane, maybe not this year. I mean, at some point, holding on to him is going to be difficult. I mean, this is a guy that SEC schools are going to come calling for. I mean, just because of what he's doing. So that's what comes with when you're a program of this size and you have success. I mean, we saw it with Willie Fritz. So that's a part of it too.
Well, Rod, that's the next step for Tulane, right? I mean, they've got the Fear the Wave collective down. They've got money, okay? So they got money to be able to compete in NIL. The next step for them is to fulfill the promises they made to Willie Fritz and build that practice facility, build that sports performance facility, and get that done. So again, Summerall, it makes it harder for Summerall to maybe look at an SEC team or another team, because look, the formula is there for him. He could pull players that, again, from Power 4 schools, especially ex-Louisiana kids that went to those Power 4 schools that want to come home. He knows, again, the group of 5, because he's going there and he's getting all these guys. You saw what he just did this year. So there's a path for him every single year in the AAC to be a top team.
Yeah, and say also the accessibility of the playoffs, playing for a national championship too, because, you know, in the old system, you know, outside of a miracle and beating some big games, like you're not getting into that playoff. Now with this 12-team playoff, there is a viable path for schools like Tulane, like a Boise State to get in. So you don't necessarily have to make that jump to the SEC or the Big 12 if you don't have that desire.
Might be an easier path.
It may be an easier path to do that. So that's also selling it. But yes, you're right. Tulane has to show, again, continue showing that commitment to football. So that is getting the practice facility, giving these upgrades that eventually big programs or really good programs has. Tulane has got to show that to keep John Summerall.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, it's set up for them, and they're right there. They can't go backwards now. I mean, you're right there. Just continue doing the small things. You're in a great city like New Orleans where people are going to want to come to. So recruiting to Tulane is not hard now. I mean, because they're winning and they've won for enough years in a row. People are starting to like, okay, this is a real thing now. So they just got to ride the momentum now, ride the wave or whatever you want.
There you go. I like that. There you go. Ride the wave. Well, I'll tell you what, you should have learned something from the Willie Fritz situation. You made a promise that wasn't fulfilled. That's a guy, again, that's in his 60s that would have retired at Tulane. Okay, now you got the opposite. You got a young guy that everybody's going to want to come after. So again, you got to make sure that you move quickly to be able to do what is necessary to be able to hold on to him. Things are a little different in Baton Rouge right now, though. 6-4, 3-3 in the conference. They lost 3 in a row. Texas A&M, Alabama, Florida. They lose to Florida 27-16. They got Vandy on Saturday night. Ricardo, I'll start with you. What happened?
It's the second half of that Texas A&M game, and it has just snowballed since then. And I think part of the decline of what LSU is happening, I think offensively we'll start there. The offensive line isn't playing as well as it should be. And because of that, they're not able to establish the run. And then again, it seems like we have a common theme here. You don't establish the run, you're not helping out Garrett Nussmeier. And I think we're kind of seeing the vulnerability of Garrett Nussmeier where, and I keep saying this, he's not Jane Daniels, but he's still a reasonably good Division I quarterback, but he's limited. So there are things where Jane Daniels can get you out of certain situations that Garrett Nussmeier can't do with this offense. So we see some decline there. And defensively, man, you can't stop a running quarterback. You saw that with A&M in the second half when they put in their quarterback. You saw that with Alabama and Jalen Milroe. And then Florida, you had a DJ Lagway who wasn't as mobile because he was coming off a hamstring injury, and he's beating them in the pocket with big plays. And that's another discussion where I think DJ Lagway, I think Florida's set with Billy Napier. Having that quarterback may have saved his job for years to come. But yeah, those are kind of where LSU is kind of struggling here. And I know Brian Kelly's going to get the brunt of all this, obviously,
Yes.
because he's leading, this whole crew here, and it is kind of disappointing where, it's the first year of the playoff. You're expecting to kind of do that, kind of make a run to the playoff and to the postseason, and it's not going to happen this year. In terms of everybody talking about does Brian Kelly keep this job, and I know that's probably a discussion we're going to have and continue here. I think as long as this recruiting class that he's got coming in, because now you've got that quarterback, starting with the quarterback. We all talked about how big that is in college football with Bryce Underwood. If he can keep him, not lose him to Michigan, and keep some of these other pieces, that would buy him time. And I think that's the kind of upgrade that this roster needs to compete with these other teams in the SEC and to get to the playoffs. But right now, this team, even at the beginning of the season, I felt like it was a fringe playoff team, but not good enough to be a playoff team.
Yeah. Rob, I want you to do the same thing. Talk about the team that kind of morphed into Brian Kelly.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on what he said at the end there, because that's exactly what my point was going to be. I think this team, when you go back to that Ole Miss game, I think that game probably gave the fan base a little bit more hope than, I don't think this team was really as good as people thought they were.
Right.
I thought they should have lost that South Carolina game. So, I mean, they're 6-4 now, but I think this team is probably closer to 4-6 than they are to 6-4. I mean, I didn't think they were really, as good as people thought they were, and I think it's just starting to show during this streak. And running quarterbacks obviously gave them a fit. The one in South Carolina gave them fit. So that definitely hurt them. And then toward the end, I thought after the who was before Florida? That was Alabama. Yeah, Alabama, I thought after the Alabama game, I didn't think they would win in Florida. I just thought they probably quit now at this point. And they didn't play like they quit, but I mean, it wasn't a good effort. And I don't know how they're going to play Saturday. I mean, they're at home, and so I mean, they should be fine. But I think the Vanderbilt's going to be a tough out for them too, because I really don't have
quarterback.
Don't have a lot to play for now. I don't know if Kelly's really connecting with some of his guys. I mean, obviously everybody saw the video of him, fussing with one of the receivers, and so I don't know if there's a disconnect there or not. So that's what I'll be watching Saturday. I don't know if this team has it.
$61 million buyout, 10-year deal, and we were talking about before we came on the air today, one of the reasons why he got the 10-year deal is because they had two previous coaches that won national championships that let the program slip, and they were quick to buy them out and move on. So again, if he's going to leave Notre Dame, he wants some stability. He gets a 10-year deal. He gets a $61 million buyout. It's going to be difficult to make it difficult to buy him out. But back-to-back 10-win seasons. Things have kind of dropped here. The natives are restless in Baton Rouge because, again, the expectation is that we're going to be in the SEC mix every year. But, guys, the SEC has changed, right? I mean, again, when you look at the SEC and you look at the standings right now, more than likely going forward, it is such again, each your own type division or type conference now. 2 losses is probably going to be maybe what the champions will have.
Yeah, but I think the SEC will still get 4 teams in the playoffs probably.
I agree with that.
Even if you don't get the SEC championship game, I think just getting to the playoffs is the thing. Man. I think that's what fans want. And is this a playoff team? I don't think they ever were really, but they were close. I mean, they did enough to make you think they were. So his thing will be just he got to get to the playoffs. I mean, that's what we have to do. But I think he definitely gets another year to do that, and they're gonna have to win some of these big games. I mean, obviously he's won some in the past, but it's going to be a little tougher now than it used to be.
Yeah, I think you're so right with the fans' expectations rising after they beat Ole Miss. But if you look across the board about the upper tier of the SEC, based for LSU, when you watch an LSU-Alabama game, LSU, in terms of athletes, in terms of where they're at, they're miles away from where Alabama is.
Right.
And I think they're miles away from where they're miles away from Georgia. I would say even Texas, because I think Texas has improved, especially in the interior on the offensive and defensive lines. I think Ole Miss, that was a 50-50 toss. I think there was a lot of emotion. It's Saturday night in there, and Ole Miss still could have won that game. So I think there was kind of maybe a little bit of delusion of where LSU was in terms of the upper echelon of the SEC. But again, that's why it's so big that he gets this recruiting class in, because at least that kind of narrows the gap. Because if you're getting #1 guys in all these positions, including at quarterback, again, I'll compare it to Florida too, where Florida now has their quarterback. It's Florida. They can recruit. Maybe we see them kind of build it. Same thing with LSU. You get that quarterback and then build on those number one spots where it's offensive and defensive line that you're building. Then get those edge players or whatever. Close that gap, and then I think it's better to kind of assess where Brian Kelly is in terms of, like, is this a guy that can lead this program and get ultimately this program to a national championship? We see the consistency already. But now I think this is kind of where the next discussion goes is all right, now if you get that class, can you lead this class to a national championship? And so far in his career, we've seen him build programs, get to national championship games, but you got to win them.
Yeah.
And he's got to do that with this group and the next recruiting class coming in.
Guys, I brought this up on the radio show, and I'd like to get both of you guys' take on this. It's a different world in college athletics now with NIL and unlimited transfers. And we saw a guy like Nick Saban, again, considered maybe the greatest coach in the history of college football, say, you know what, I've had enough, I'm moving on. Kelly's a foundation builder. He's a guy that, again, Notre Dame, they recruit different athletes than maybe LSU does. Again, players go to Notre Dame because, again, they want to be part of that tradition. They go to LSU because they want to be NFL players, right? Is there a scenario where you look at now how things have changed so quickly in college athletics, where, again, maybe the style of coaching, what Kelly has done in the past may not work with today's athletes?
Oh, I think definitely that's the case. I mean, you see a lot in basketball. You see a lot of these guys that Coach K and all these guys end up retiring. I mean, the game just kind of changed with NIL and transfer portal. I mean, you're not getting guys and grooming them for 4 years, and so it is different. And
is it a younger man's game now because of that?
I think it could. Well, I think an older coach can do it. He's going to have to learn how to connect better with these players, and I don't know if Kelly has done that yet. I mean, I think he's still in that process of figuring that out, and until he does, I think some of these same issues, I mean, like even these penalties and stuff, I mean, that's all on coaching. I mean, it's discipline stuff, and
yes.
So you have to kind of know how to relate to these players to address those issues, and I'm not sure, how good he is at doing that, and I think, to me, that's going to be the key for him, because he's at LSU. I mean, he's going to get talent. He's going to get all these 5-star guys. I mean, who doesn't want to go, play in Death Valley? So, to me, it's going to be that adjustment for him. If he can do that, I think he'll be fine. But if not, he's going to continue to lose some of these big games.
I wonder if Nick Saban was 10 or 15 years younger, and he could have the energy to adjust to this type of era.
Right.
I still think he'd be successful because there's still. A, he can sell that, I can get you to the NFL. But B, it's still about, when you're recruiting, it's still about selling the players and those parents and those, and like, how are you going to mold me into a man? How are you going to make me maximize my value as a football player, as a person? And the coaches who can still do that and still get that message across are going to be successful. It doesn't matter the era. They're always going to be that. This era, you just have to adjust to the rules of how players are going to move, the flexibility. Players have more power than they ever had.
Right.
You have to adjust to that as a head coach and know that. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to change your style, but you got to understand that part of it. So maybe sometimes there are times to push hard, but there's also times you've got to know when to be like, all right, I trust my player, or whatever, or I don't need to get on him as much because I'm looking, long term or whatever. Brian Kelly's always had that. I would say attitude or approach he's had, and it's carried in Cincinnati, it's carried at Notre Dame or whatever, where yes, like, as long as he produces, it's fine to put up with. But the second you're not winning, it kind of gets old hat and you don't want to hear it. So I don't know if it's necessarily a young man's game in this era.
Right.
I still think coaching, ultimately, the way you teach players, the way you lead men, it all is the same. It doesn't matter there. You just have to adjust to the rules. And I think Brian Kelly, in this sense, he just has to, winning cures all.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, maybe if you can get this roster maybe a little bit better, maybe things go a little bit easier and you can put up with some of that stuff. But, like I said, when you're adding NIL and all that other stuff, it's just adjust to those rules, but good coaches will adjust and win.
As long as you're not setting your ways, right?
Right.
I mean, again, I don't know if the authoritating of being an authoritarian or, again, a dictator in a program now works anymore.
Yeah, that's gone. That era, I think, is gone. But you can still be hard on players, but understand that it's not I'm in charge, you're whatever. It's almost like a partnership in a way.
Right.
But I'm ultimately going to have the final decision on things.
Yeah.
Right.
No doubt.
I think when you have success like he has, it is probably harder for him to change.
Right.
He's just been, my way has worked before,
Right.
so let's do it my way. And
But college athletic has changed right in front of it.
Right.
And even Nick Saban has adjusted. Adjusted when he was Alabama. He's adjusted his ways of going, all right, maybe I'm going to give my coaches a little bit more leeway, or I'm going to do this or that. But in the end, he still got his message across.
Right.
They still won games. He was smart in knowing, he even adjusted the way his defenses, for example, his defenses were playing. They were big, built slow or whatever. Game changed. It was spat. So instead of being set in my ways, this is how my defense have always worked.
Yeah.
He recruited lighter linebackers, faster linebackers, adjusted the game. Guys who can adjust to that, those are always your best coaches. It's going, my way still works, but I know how to tinker it to make sure that it works in whatever today's game is.
Hate to do this to the Pelicans. We only got about 3 minutes, but they probably just deserve about 3 minutes. 5-11, loses 12 of the last 14. Look, I will be mentioned as we open the show. They're playing the squadron right now. Again, they've lost all of their starters and their top players. The question is, again, can they pull out of this, and how much pressure is on Willie Green now?
To me, it shouldn't be any pressure because I just think what he's been dealt a really bad hand. I don't know if any NBA coach has ever been dealt a hand this bad. And when you look at the schedule, I know a lot of times we look at it and it's time to hit the panic button. But I looked at the number of games they played, and you compare it to an NFL schedule. They basically played if this is an NFL season, they played 3 games. So it's a little too early. They can get these guys healthy and go on a run where you win 15 out of 20, and then all of a sudden you're kind of back in the mix. You just want to get in the playoffs, and this is a year that we thought that they needed to get a top 4 seed or top 5 seed. That's probably not going to happen.
Right.
But to me, they can still do what they've been doing and get one of those bottom seeds or get in the play-in tournament and get in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's way too early to make a final verdict on what this team is because of the injuries and everything else. Remember that first game that they won against the Bulls? There were some pieces that you went, man, if they're healthy or they kind of work. Remember they had that game without Zion. They didn't have Trey at the time too. There are pieces where you go, okay, this could be sustainable. This could work. We're going to have to wait to see when that, when everyone's healthy, and then, then we can see what truly the identity of this team and what they look like. I will say it's not time to panic about Willie Green or whatever, but if they get healthy and they continue to lose, then you can start asking those questions. Is Willie Green the right guy for this job?
Yeah. The question is, again, when will they get healthy? And again, it doesn't look, anytime soon. There's no timeline on Zion. B.I. was out last night. Again, you might be getting Herb back maybe in a week or so, maybe Hawkins in a week or so. But man, they got to get there. And Murray's still, a few weeks away, right?
Yeah, and I think Herb will get back probably sooner than anybody.
Right.
But having not just 8 players, but your top 8 players without a question out in one night is just, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it.
I don't know how you can win.
Right.
You can't. You can't.
You just can't. Again, literally, it's a G League team they're putting out there right now. Right. And look, there's a little drop off from the Najee Marshall, the Dyson Daniel, and also Nance from what they were last year. You could put those guys in the starting lineup and they could fill in. These guys, again, maybe just a little bit of a drop-off than what they had on the bench last year, at least so far.
Yeah, you got journeymen, G Leaguers, that's kind of the construction of what this team is. And yeah, if they had a Najee still on the roster, maybe do they have a little bit more firepower? I know Dyson Daniels is playing well in Atlanta right now. But it's kind of all right, maybe that would be the case. I don't know. But again, you can't, and back to Rod's point, you can't win when you have your top 8 guys. It is simply impossible to win games, and right now they just have to ride it out until at least they can get some reinforcements.
And the schedule's brutal.
Yeah.
It's just brutal right now. No matter whether you had your starters or not, it's just been a brutal schedule as well, no doubt. Hopefully, again, they'll be able to turn it around. Again, we'd like to be able to see the full complement of players out there and see Murray out there being able to dish, which is what he was brought in for, right? And again, we haven't really seen that except for the first game, and hopefully, again, this will not continue to be an epidemic with the soft tissue injuries with the Pelicans. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here on the program. Always appreciate you guys coming down. Ricardo, Lecompte, Rod Walker, thanks again for joining us on the program today. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a QR code on your screen right now. They'll take you to my website, ericasher.com, also the WLAE-TV YouTube channel. And there's so many ways to catch our program right here on WLAE-TV, also on Pelican Sports Television, WLAE-TV 2. Again, set your DVR. You'll never miss the program. You catch me on the radio, 106.1 The Ticket, 4 to 6 weekdays. You can listen live at ericasher.com. We have our own app now, so 106.1 The Ticket app. You can download that app and take the station, the show with you anywhere. Our podcast podcasts are on all podcasting platforms. Anchor, Spotify is where our base is, but we're everywhere. And of course, you can listen on iHeart, TuneIn Radio as well. Again, I want to thank the folks here at WLAE-TV who again produce our program. Also again our underwriters who make this program happen. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Thomas Healy, Ali Chacon, and our director William Hill. For Rod Walker and also Ricardo Lecompte, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for a Thanksgiving edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for watching.
Hotelier Harris Rosen has a precious memento hung in his office that celebrates Apollo 11.
Armstrong and Aldrin and Collins were the three first astronauts to the moon. I can't say that I got to know them, but I certainly did see them on the Space Coast. And because I got to know some of the hierarchy at Kennedy Space Center when they made it to the moon, and then returned safely, thank God. I had this front page and I sent it to one of my friends and I said, I know this is a big ask, but if the three guys would sign it, I would be forever grateful. And they did. And that's signed by Armstrong and Aldrin and Collins, and I treasure that. It will certainly go down in history as one of the greatest achievements of